Hey, I'm Suzanna Kaye, and if you've seen my video, the how to put your Rocketbook on steroids with these bullet journal style tips, then you know I love talking about my Rocketbook. Well, these are the top 5 questions that I have gotten on that video because it's been super popular. And over the past 3 years, over 100,000 people have watched it. So check out the video if you haven't seen it already. But I've heard these questions from the comments. I've heard of them from the people in my Facebook group or my members. And I wanted to share with you today my 5 top questions that I get asked the most about using my Rocketbook. Now, this is the Rocketbook. It used to be called Everlast. Now it's called the Core. So it's just the basic Rocketbook, and I've stuck stickers all over it. I've used it for 3 years now, so it's taken a beating and it's still taking really, really well. Number 5, as far as the questions go, is can you rip the pages out? And what is it like paper? What do the pages feel like? So with the Rocketbook, it does not feel like regular paper. It's kind of a plastic, like a really thin plastic, but it feels kind of like a satin finish. So if you've ever had one of those jewelry boxes or something with a nice satin finish, or like a really nice piece of technology, that cardboard box with a satin finish, it feels like that. So it's not like paper, and at first it took me a little bit to get used to writing on it, but once I got used to it, I love it. It also does not rip or bend as easily as paper. Like it bends like this, but it does not get damaged as easily as paper does. As far as ripping pages out, you can't rip pages out. You could probably remove the spiral binding, I would imagine, and maybe rebind it or something if you needed to. But let's test this out. I actually was thinking earlier, I've got one of the minis. Earlier, I was thinking about actually cutting out my pages that I use the most often for my minis in order to make a little template for it. So let's try this. I have never cut my Rocketbook before. There we go. So you can cut it out. It cuts really easily. And now I've got my little template for my work for the day. I can put it on my little picture frame. So now I can actually keep this showing all the time instead of having it stuck inside that little Rocketbook. So you can't swap them out easily, but you can cut them out, it seems. Now, if you have the Orbit, which is, it's kind of like this flipbook style, which I have a bunch of my notes on. This is magnetic. I'm going to do a whole different video on the Orbit, but this you can swap out the entire packet, not the single page though. Number 4, how long can you leave the ink on the page of the Rocketbook? Now, as I mentioned, I have used this for more than 3 years now. It was September 2017 that I did my first video about this Rocketbook, and I'd already had it a little bit from there. So there have been times when I have left the ink on my page for over a year. There are a couple pages that it did last over a year in the back of my book with the ink on it before I erased it. I had some ghosting, which just means that after I erased it, I could kind of still see the writing. But as I kept using those pages and erasing them with the like wet cloth or wet sponge, the ghosting started to disappear. So I barely even see that old ghosting. And that was after having the writing on there for over a year. Now, they don't recommend keeping the writing on that long. So I would say try to make it a goal once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. Erase your pages so that way you don't have to worry about any ghosting. But it had lasted over a year before. So there we go. Number 3, what pens do you use and can you erase with them? And does it smear when you touch it? So kind of all these pen questions. So the pens that they recommend, and they always send one with the Rocketbook whenever I've ordered one, they've always sent a cloth and a pen. It's the Frixion pen, Frixion by Pilot. And these are erasable pens that erase by, as it's called, friction. So only use the Frixion pens on your Rocketbook because that way they will, write on there. And this pen's kind of running out of ink. I should have grabbed a different one. But yes, it will smear. I'm going to grab one of my pink ones. I'll tell you about that in a minute. It will smear if it's still wet and you touch it. But once it dries, once you've written on there and it dries, which takes, 15 seconds or something, then after you touch it, it will not smear anymore. So unless your hands are like really very damp, then it's not going to smear at all once it dries. And this is probably even, let's see. Yep, it's already dry. So it does not take long to dry at all. So don't flip the page over on top of it until it's dry. But the friction pens are what you use. You can use the friction eraser on the pages as well, but it will kind of leave a little bit of a mark, and it does not erase as well as using a wet cloth. But it is possible, after I use the eraser, I kind of rub on it to get any eraser goo off. Don't use a normal pencil eraser, only use the friction pen eraser. And also, I've never tried using the Friction brand highlighters on here, but let's try it now. Let's see. So I'm always doing weird things with my Rocketbook. So it shows up. We'll wait and see if it dries. And this is kind of an off-brand, isn't it? No, this is actually a Friction. Okay, we're good. Okay, well, it takes much longer to dry. I just smeared it, so we'll come back to that. Also, can you use a Sharpie on it was one of the questions. And yeah, you can. Because on this one, I made a little template with Sharpie. And that way when I erase, then the Sharpie stays, but anything written with the friction pen gets erased. And it did not bleed through to the other side. So I could not see the Sharpie on the other side. Once I erase it, I will show you because I've got stuff on both sides. Number 2, I get this one for some reason a lot. This is a common question. What kind of sponge do you use to wipe it off? And where did you get the cloth that you dried off with? So this is my fancy system. I usually keep a moistened, it's just with water, moistened sponge in like a Ziploc or resealable bag, super fancy. So when I go to erase a page, I'll do this on this little page right now. All you do is you just take it and you can wipe it right off. Put it up. I wipe it off with the sponge, dry it off, usually with like a paper towel if I'm doing a large page, and then I use Rocketbook sent the cloth with the Rocketbook. So whenever I've ordered a Rocketbook, they send a cloth. So I then just dry it off with the cloth that they've given me, and it's good to go. So there we go. But the sponges, you can use any sponge that you want. There's no special brand or anything. I think I got this from like the dollar store. Wherever you have a sponge around the house, just grab that one. Paper towel is just a paper towel. I use the softer paper towels. I don't know if they'll scratch the Rocketbook or not, but that's what I use. Yeah. So really quickly, I can show you on the back. You can't see the Sharpie that was written on the other side. Now that I erased that, I can show you. And let's go back really quickly before we go to number 1 and see about erasing the highlighter. It's finally dry. And yeah, it does erase with the eraser, and I bet it will erase with the sponge. Oh, so yeah, highlighters work too. The friction highlighters, I guess the official word that I just created. Yes, they work. Finally, the number 1 question I get, and I get this question over and over and over and over again, is what kind of tabs do you use on your Rocketbook? Also, that goes along with the question, what kind of post-it tape do you use? So in the original video, I talked about how I use my Rocketbook as a planner sometimes, and I have this paper tape along the side, and I just wrote the different times, so that way I can plan out my day and erase it at the end of the day. Plus I have little tabs so I can get to specific pages easily, such as my daily planner. So I can just flip to those pages. The brand of the tabs that I usually use is the Post-it brand, but I don't only use Post-it brand. Like these, I will use these sometimes. I got these from the dollar store. As long as they say that they are the removable index tabs. That's the main thing. Other than that, go wild. Whatever index tab you want. Sometimes I use a little magnetic bookmark with a tab on it. If I don't want the gummy to get stuck on the page, then I can just flip the bookmark onto it, use that as a tab. It is up to you. The Post-it notes, if you leave them on for a long time, they can leave a little bit of gummy residue. You can usually just rub it off, but if you leave it on a very long time, like I have with my agenda page, it will leave a mark. So just know that if you leave it on a very long time, it will leave a mark, but if it's just a short amount of time, you can usually just rub it right off. And the tape that I use, because I like to be able to wipe off the page without losing my template, and this will leave a mark if it's left on for a long time, is the Post-it brand label and cover up tape. That's it. So I use that along the side. Again, it can leave some gummy residue. You can usually rub it right off, but if you leave it on for a while, then you might not be able to rub it all off. So I only use this especially on pages that I plan to leave it on. But if I'm using the friction pens, then I can actually erase what I've written on it and write new things, which is nice because the friction pens work on regular paper too. But that's it. Those are my top 5 things that top 5 questions that I get on the Rocketbook video. I hope that you enjoyed this. Check out my other videos on Rocketbook, on productivity. You can also follow me on my website, SuzannaKaye.com. So I'll see you over there if you want to find out more about what I do. Follow me in other areas. And also check out my other videos and subscribe to the channel because I talk about organizing, I talk about productivity. It's not all Rocketbook, but I do have some good Rocketbook videos. Thanks so much, and I will see you soon. I love you.